Hi, Dan Goodstein here. Welcome to this week's executive interview series. I'm joined today by Tom Taulli. Tom's a contributor for Forbes magazine and is the author of Artificial Intelligence Basics, a non-technical introduction, as well as the Robotic Process Automation Handbook, a guide to implementing RPA systems. Tom, good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
So before we jump in, tell everyone watching just a little bit more about your background.
hmm Yeah, so my background has always been on technology and development, coding, software languages, and I say that my dad got me into this. Usually, you don't follow what your dad says, but this is an example that was the exception. My dad bought me a computer when I was 12 years old and put it on my desk. And he left my room, and I looked at the computer for a couple of days, and I said, maybe I should do something with it. So I got into it, really loved it, started to code it, and fell in love with computers. I was back in the 1980s, and so when I got into college, I started a company in the e-learning area, and this is when they had DVDs and or CD-ROMs,
Sure.
And then the internet came around, and then started some other companies and invested in different companies, and then the writing came along in the mid 90s. I had a friend at Forbes.com who essentially started Forbes, the website, and I started contributing at that point. So that's a little bit of my background.
Great, great. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've been following you now for the last few months, and I think you have some interesting perspectives. So I want to start with RPA. You actually
Mhm.
wrote an article, I think, back in March about whether or not RPA was recession-proof. So I'm curious
Mhm.
as to what you found.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you talk to vendors in the space, they always say nice things. That it's always happy times. When you're not, I'm a former entrepreneur, and so I know how that goes. So I always take things with a grain of salt. In terms of being recession proof, I would say yes and no. I think if you are a major company that has a lot of backing, a lot of customers, a full blown solution, I think you're in pretty good shape right now. Uh, if you're the 70 or 80 other companies that don't have that, life could be a little tougher in this environment. I think when the economy gets tougher, uh, customers tend to focus on trusted sources and solutions and stability, and they don't want to take as much risk in those environments. So I do think for the UI paths and the blue prisms and the automation anywheres, I think they will do very well in this environment. And I think UiPath did announce some of their numbers, and it looks like they've exceeded expectations already this year. So probably gives you an indication of what's going on with the RPA market right now.
So, and I know you've been tracking some recent investments, some acquisitions in this space, most recently Fortress IQ and the Microsoft acquisition of Softmotive. Who do you think is poised to come out of this ahead?
The big three, definitely the ones I mentioned: the Blue Prisms, Automation Anywhere, UiPath. There's some others like Work Fusion and so forth. Gartner just recently put out their report, and take the first five or six off of Gartner on the top of the list, and you can probably be pretty confident that they're going to be around and be dominant players. I do think that the player that has probably surprised everyone, although it really shouldn't have, is Microsoft. Uh, in the they made the investment in Fortress IQ. They made the acquisition. I don't think this is going to be the end of the acquisitions. They may even do more of I mean, this has a. I mean, their market cap is massive. They may be the most valuable company in the world right now. They have more cash than most companies could dream of, and they have these assets like Office and Teams, and I mean they're just everywhere in the corporate environment. So they're just in such a great position to take advantage of that. But I do think other companies like Oracle and IBM, even Amazon, even Google are going to make plays for RPA, and I wouldn't be surprised that would probably mean some more acquisitions in the next couple of years.
Do you see anything, Tom, in the space in general changing in a post-COVID world? The companies thinking about it differently?
Definitely. I think everyone's evaluating what has just happened and where things are moving. I would say, and I don't think it's just for RPA. I mean, I think it's for IT in general.
Yeah.
Um, I think we've seen acceleration of this move of digital transformation, and that's not going to end. I think companies, I think the biggest thing that's happened is that, I mean, you look at a company like Bank America, 200,000 employees, massive company. I mean, most of their companies in a matter of weeks went remote.
Yeah.
And you know what? I haven't been in a bank branch in a long time. Um, I think a lot of people are probably using their online banking more than ever before. And there's probably people like my mom who just recently started using online banking. It sounds like she'll never go back to a branch ever again either. What's happened is there's just been the acceleration of getting used to and getting familiar and better use of digital technologies, and it's going to help companies who are at the forefront, also for forefront of automation, because these companies are realizing is that when you have a remote workforce, you really do need to think more about automation and security and things like that. So I think it's going to be a big catalyst for RPA, but it's clearly it's going to be a big catalyst for a lot of other cloud and IT companies, definitely.
Yeah, I felt from the beginning that this would ultimately just accelerate the inevitable, right? Where things
Yeah,
should have been going, maybe digital transformation was second or third priority on some people's lists. All of a sudden, they
yeah,
have to be digital first and digital centric. And
yeah,
as you say, no longer benefit from needing to go someplace physically when you can do it virtually. But
yeah.
I'm curious about the remote working thing. I
Hmm.
spoke to an organization this morning who shifted from 10% remote work to 60% remote work in a matter
Yeah,
of weeks. But the issue there is security. No,
yeah,
how are the
yeah.
RPA players in particular dealing with that?
That favors the big players. They have the resources, the credibility to implement stronger security systems. But you as a company should not just rely on whatever your vendor tells you about security. Uh, yeah, when you have an RPA implementation plan, security really needs to be at the top. A lot of times it's at the bottom. So you really want to bring the IT department in. You want to know what the security requirements are. And yeah, so anytime people are doing sensitive work, not on premise, on the real premises, not a software on premise, the risk just goes so much higher. I also think there's other potential risks too, just privacy. I mean, if your employees are at home, are you if you're monitoring your employees, is that kind of an invasion of their privacy? Is it could be considered harassment? I mean, I think lawyers are probably going to benefit substantially out of this whole thing, because things have happened so fast because they had to, but you don't usually have the types of guardrails and things that were put in place to try to look at some of the third and second and fourth order consequences that you usually get when you have such a major transformation in a short period of time.
Yep. Yeah. Are you seeing a particular industries or types of companies embracing automation now that hadn't before? For example, I heard the story about the SBA issues with loan processing and things. But
Yeah,
but do and I've seen some government
yeah.
folks on my network kind of all of a sudden be interested in this. Anything like that you're seeing?
Interesting you should bring up government. I do think that's one area that will, again, like you said before, this has always been on the roadmap. It's just been, we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah.
Now it's like we have to get there as soon as possible. And governments are probably in that situation because at a certain point, the spending is going to get cut because we have so much, we spent so much already. And so they're going to have to get by with a lot less. And so they're going to have very little choice but to look at RPA. And I know that they are looking at RPA. So for a lot of these vendors, the government will be a big source of demand going forward. And then, maybe, look at the retail area or restaurant area, the takeout. A lot of these companies were just not built for that. Well, if you want to survive, you really have to have that nowadays. Well, it usually means you have to have some type of technical capability, maybe a app or a website or connect to an app. So I think it's definitely taking some industries that may have been a little behind And definitely either they're going to do it or they die is probably where, and I
Yep.
think they understand that, so they're going to try it.
Yeah, there's new urgency around it, right? So for those that are watching that know they need to implement this,
Mhm.
what are some of the things that you suggest they keep an eye out for? You wrote an entire book, actually a
Yeah.
handbook on implementing RPA. What are the key
Uh,
areas for a successful implementation in your mind?
yeah, it's a 350-page book, so there's a lot to do. RPA, they think you just throw some RPA at it and just,
Right.
magic, and it just solves all your problems. And we know that technology doesn't do that, but it requires, first of all, it requires some change management. Any successful software implementation requires rethinking of how you do things, and this is even more so with RPA because we're dealing with processes and tasks within an organization, and people get used to doing things a certain way. And then there's the fear factor. It's like, anytime you say robotic and automation with processes, you kind of think, am I going to have a job next week, especially in this environment?
Right.
So you have to deal with the people issues because there's going to be a lot of natural fear around this. So the first steps for me in this implementation process is really education, is to try to get some buy-in from the top, buy-in from all levels of the organization. Be upfront about what you're trying to accomplish, what the goals here, what the technology is about. So it could be videos, it could be workshops, and try to get people involved and understand what's happening. I think is a really good first step. But a lot of times, that might get avoided. But I mean, I've talked to companies like Voya and Intuit, some of the top companies that continue to invest heavily in RPA, and this change management education component has been a key part of the success of their programs.
Yep. Yep. Well, Tom, thanks for joining us. We'll have Tom back for part two for this session, but for now, good speaking to you.
Right. Thank you very much.